Hey guys, I wanted to make a video today. Just pretty much an open-ended video. I just feel like ranting, and I often have just like so many ideas just going through my mind, or rather, a lot of just endless sort of ideas that I just think about. Just to try to understand. Um, and there's a lot of different ideas that kind of cycle through some some of the same ones that I kind of I'll not rehash, but I consider in a way a little bit more in a little bit more deeper and contemplate. Um, I I often will think about ideas independently of learning about them. So what that means is that um sometimes I'll learn about an idea and I'll just think about it in my own time and try to understand it, I guess, in my own mind and to try to consider, I guess, different pathways or possibilities um, of the idea, where it might lead or certain consequences, stuff like that. And today I woke up thinking about um, this Nietzschean idea where people are best punished for their virtues. And this is an idea that pretty much like, okay, so Jesus Christ as a figure, as a symbol, as whatever you might believe, I suppose, he was punished um not because he was, say, a sinner, but because he was actually a positive example, a good person, so to speak, and that this notion that good people undergo punishment, um, and this seems like not only a theme in mythology but also history. There's definitely forms of persecution where I believe people who are really great people they undergo forms of punishment. I mean, you can just think of so many. You can just make a list. I mean, Anne Frank, Martin Luther King, JFK. It doesn't have to be uh, strictly something out of mythology or religion or something like that. You can find real world examples, and and I think there's that's something I try to understand. It's been something for several years now, probably maybe 6 years or longer, that I have really at times of obsessed over. Um, it's a very controversial, it's a very controversial thing, I think, to even talk about. That there's this sort of Cain and Abel dynamic where, you know, Abel, he is the positive example. He does good and he makes proper sacrifices. It's just a very short story in the Bible that anyone can really read. And so Abel, he does good in his life. Cain, he doesn't. He doesn't do the right sacrifices. He's everything is subpar, is not quite up to standard, I suppose. And what happens is Cain, his life doesn't really work out well for him, so he takes vengeance on Abel and kills Abel. And and I think there's and and that's a story that I think about so much, that people in my life they they almost like get annoyed by it. And I mean, yeah, it's and you might, and it's like I wonder why they get annoyed by that, but I think it's often a real dynamic that explains human psychology. And so basically just like jealousy, envy, and that sort of stuff. And this is this is something that I think characterizes broad scale political movements today, like with communism and socialism. I think it's entirely like a it's like a it's sort of a placeholder for religion, or what takes the place of I believe, like a religion. And um basically the ideologies of communism and socialism, they're they're primarily materialistic, uh and predicated on the belief that material can somehow satisfy or satiate someone in in even just like um in a total sense, I suppose. That things like having a nice house, having uh the highest quality food, having um the highest quality experiences that wealth can get you. Um, I talked to someone who claimed to be a billionaire recently, over Reddit, so who knows if that was true. And but they're saying they can get any partner, and they're actually advocating for socialism, but they were basically saying that they're a billionaire, they're well off financially, and that uh um they can sleep with any girl that they want. And um pretty much just saying, that they can just get whatever they want. And and the thing is like, I don't care. I that stuff doesn't phase me. I don't envy people with money. I don't salivate at the idea of um the luxury lifestyle. I think that it's often something that is, I haven't found a really good way of saying it or a word for it, but uh kind of almost like a last ditch effort or something like that, where when people don't find their satisfaction in their lives or their life fulfilling, that they they have these sort of fantasies that I think they hold in their mind as sort of like a solution, I suppose. And I people like to have this idea of a solution that if only then things will be fine. Things will be okay, and we can ease up and everything will be okay. I don't believe that at all. I think that people who attain, um well, first of all, someone in a position of wealth with a lot of money, and they're saying they can get every girl. It's like, I don't believe that. I mean, look at Grimes, the prior wife of Elon Musk, who left him, and I don't think he can get her back with just money. That's total BS. And also, I think people in those sorts of positions, they get a sort of existential dread about when they feel like all their relationships are transactional, in a sense where people are just looking at them for money, and so they're trying to seek their favor for money, but it's not authentic, genuine relationships. And I think that's a big issue with materialism, is that money isn't everything, and um it's so cliche, but I don't think money can really buy you happiness, or like a deeper sense of fulfillment in your life. That there's always going to be something that um there's always going to be something more that is it's always going to be a bigger problem. And so when people think that if they just have enough money that all their problems will be solved indefinitely, it's like, no, wrong. That's not true. It's an idea that people like to believe in, and I think when I talk about this and try to it's almost like burst their bubble. People get really defensive over it. They don't like it. They don't like to have this idea get challenged, because I think people want to have this hope so bad that a communist revolution or socialism, these things would be the solution to all their problems. And when you tell them that it's not quite the solution, I think that creates um, a sort of feedback where I think people don't really want to hear that, and they don't want to think that their plot is gonna fail, and they don't want to have a buzzkill or something. And so there's that. And so another thing too is this idea of the Christian Crusades, and how there was a war waged against sin, I suppose. I mean, there's definitely a deeper story to um, the Crusades, but that's just how I understand it at a abstract in an abstract sense. It's just a war against sin. And a lot of people, though they reject religion or religion traditional values, there's this sort of uh, crusading, in some sense, against sin, or those who are untowardly, whatever secular way you want to try to describe sin, I suppose. People who are, you could think of as problem populations, I suppose, and so on. People who are counter revolutionaries, people who get in the way of your plans, and so there's this sort of, one thing I want to understand is this sort of um this how people's primary and it's not merely people who are secular. It's a general thing I notice in people, where there's this punitive obsession, this obsession to punish people, and that people, they're almost like primarily driven like sharks to sniff out blood, and or like a bull that sees red, and just the right amount of like dog whistles, or um however you want to say it, uh just the right just the right combination of, or signaling um that people are keeping an eye out for, it can sort of trigger something in people that can turn people very hostile, it, immediately. It's like a switch gets turned, and and there's this hostility, I think, in most people that is dormant but can be activated given the right signaling. I mean, you think of someone out in public who is wearing a MAGA hat or something. That is absolutely triggering for some people. Um, I don't believe that people should, pin that to themselves, that regime or any sort of like, I don't even mean to call it a regime, but like a sort of um something that is like a almost like a imperial symbol, like a side of like red and blue and these things, um and just playing that sort of game. I don't think people should participate in that, but it doesn't really upset me. I see this with people who were wearing the communist symbols, and it's like it doesn't upset me, but it's like, whoa, that person is putting themselves in great danger. I think the same thing when see someone in a MAGA hat. It's like I think that person's putting themselves in danger when they do that, and it's because these symbols, people don't under people almost, I want to say can't, but it's more of a technical thing. Um, like they can understand, but most people just don't understand the what these symbols, what they actually represent. And usually, so when someone represents, say, like a cross, like a crucifix, um, or a communist symbol, um, or a MAGA, um, even like a Buddhist symbol, some of these things that when people see them, they're gonna make it the lowest association that they can. They're immediately gonna associate it with the lowest thing that they can. It's gonna be involuntary. Actually, it's just they're just gonna, when they see the symbol, they're gonna see the worst. Um, they're gonna associate the symbol with the with the uh, uh with the people who other people who have represented themselves with the symbol, but who were like bad actors. They're gonna associate it with the worst actors of that symbol. Who and the person wearing it may not even know or um identify with those bad actors, but it's what's getting represented. And I mean, the same could be said about the LGBT flag, and people could associate that with child predators, and uh, people could associate MAGA with child predators. People could associate the crucifix with child predators. People could associate people could associate the communist symbol with Mao, and then like child predators. It's very, people make these connections off of these symbols, and these symbols are like signals, and you don't want to identify with these things. Okay, so because many regimes, they just come and go, right? And they're temporary, and you don't want to identify with these things that are so temporary. Like even this hat. This hat is probably problematic. It's like it's run Woodstock. It's and I really like this hat because like it's got this sort of camo. I forget what this design is sort of called, but it's like people could associate the hippie movement with drug dealing thieves or whatever, and so yeah, I think there's a and I think when it gets really blatant is really when it's the biggest red flag, and when it causes people the most danger. So, um, there's that. Um, but like I said, like if I see someone out in public that is wearing a certain symbol, even if it's like a Nazi symbol, my reaction to that isn't to go and hurt that person, even though I know that's sort of a logical uh that's an easily foreseeable thing that would occur to whoever is representing the label or the symbol. It's like, oh, I could easily see that happening. Even when people are like the Buddhist, uh, the original Buddhist swastika, and if it has all these beautiful designs and stuff, it's like I can see that someone out there is gonna be so ignorant and just belligerent that they're gonna just attack the symbol, like, um, and so I try to, you know, I personally try to just disconnect from um not identifying with those sorts of things. But this reaction that in culture today, where people do that, where people do have these reactions, I don't agree with the act or the action, or like the I don't agree with the person wearing the swastika, and I don't agree with the person who just attacked someone for wearing the swastika. That might sound like, whoa, man, like you're just supposed to just kill these people. That's sort of the sentiment that I see today. Is like, don't you know that's just a free pass to kill someone? Why wouldn't you want to capitalize on that? And there's many reasons. I think that people can change their minds about things. I think it's often a thing of ignorance. It's not really a. It's often very shallow, and because it's very shallow, it's very. I don't think they're really. Um, I think a lot of people can just be talked down and out of it. There's going to be exceptions, of course. People who clutch their pearls, so to speak, and so yeah. Um, so it's this thing though, like I mentioned earlier, this secular form of crusading, this secular crusade, where even though there's not no explicit religious sort of thing to it, where it's like, oh, good and evil. Um, there's so many secular people that they don't believe in God, but I guess they believe in evil. And so um, yeah, you have this sort of uh political environment right now where it's like a crusade against sin, in some sense, or untowardly, people who are misbehaviors. And so it's this idea that you're just supposed to go out and just wage war against people who are not good. Um, whatever that means. And there's something about this that I think people they often don't check themselves with it, because it's like, okay, how do you know who's actually good or bad? And or what parts of people are good and bad, and like, are you a perfect surgeon in that procedure? And how, because the good in people, it's like, there's such thing as casualties, and I think there's this thing that people often, it's like they don't even have that in mind, that notion of casualties, um, or unintended consequences. And so they have this all out sort of offensive strategy, which is just total violence. And 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 that's the strategy, I suppose. That's how they're gonna come out on top. It leads me to thinking more broadly about, I guess, the timeline of events or future events, and sort of how the cards actually play out with this sort of strategy of just outright violence against whatever it may be. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. It's just your strategy of violence to somehow, um whatever the goal may be. Maybe the goal is to elevate yourself, maybe it's to lower yourself. Um Maybe it's to humble the other person and bring them down. Um and so that's one thing I have really thought about recently and still think about is it's it's how people from it from their own individual self, um in a very presumptuous manner, presume that when they wage violence out onto the world, that they are gonna just come out on top in the final analysis. And it's a weird thing for me to really consider, because I I I can't. It's like it seems just so wrong to me. Um, this narcissistic idea that, whoever your sword touches must be guilty, and and this drive, I suppose, to reign powerfully through through the means of power, that there's no room for debate or discussion. That's tertiary, that's secondary. And that's what's primary, is that you just uh instill your dominance over people, and that you move through the world, um you make your way through the world by dominate through domination, that you're going to dominate all, essentially. And it's like, man, wow. Using things like intimidation, um, ostracization, different punitive means, different tactics, manipulation, lies, deceit, bending narratives, fabricating stories, fabricating, um, convictions. The true sense of the Machiavellian uh, philosophy of by any means necessary, like truly any means necessary. And what does that entail? Like, what encompasses those means of all? And you can just brainstorm: rape, murder, theft, um, cheating, um, bribery, manipulation, power, um, just all these things, force, compulsion. And it's like trying to use all of these different tools that are forbidden to achieve whatever it is you are want to achieve to get your way, I suppose. And it's this I think it's really like it seems like there's no better way. I mean there probably is. There is, but this seems just like a really great way of characterizing narcissism is this idea of just complete and utter domination that is going to be no one can stand in your way and nothing can get in the way, and you're just going to be on top. It's just so presumptuous, and like I can't even hardly believe it. um I just wish people would check themselves and check with themselves, check themselves and be like, okay, hold up. What if this doesn't go the way that I want it to? It seems like there's no real critical thought about a lot of this. It seems very whimsically orchestrated. And it seems that this has captured so many people right now in the world and in the United States. This these whimsical slogans of that are imperial. A lot of it is lacking self-awareness. Like I know there's been a lot of criticism around this stuff that's coming out. People are starting to criticize a lot of this stuff, like, oh, this all these imperial forms of virtue crusading against Nazis, fascists, bigots, racists, transphobes, the people who are not politically correct. And it's nothing to do with the crimes that they do according to the actual legal systems, um, but rather this new law that is created in the mind of the individual, where people who transgress this invented law are are absolutely to be convicted. Um, it's it's so it's so I guess wild to me. I guess like there is so little humility about it that there's no self checking, there's no pause given, there's no self analysis. Um, it's like no. See, I could just go on about that, but it's crazy to me that all of these slogans and all this political ideology appeals to people. I I would like to understand what is it that is appealing. What is it that is appealing to people about a lot of this stuff? What's it appealing to? What is it catering towards? What is it serving? And what is it enabling? And I think the deeper issue of it is a lot of these things are affirmational to uh the sense of freedom, but the sense of freedom that is um without accountability, or a sense of freedom that is exempt from the law. I forget a way of saying it. Um Basically where the laws don't apply to themselves, and that is appealing to them because if you can if you can pretty much give a green light to breaking any law without punishment, that is majorly appealing to a lot of people because a lot of people want to break laws. A lot of people want to go out and just take shit off of the shelves of a store and just that's theirs now. And there's no consequences. It's this idea, this romanticization that there will be no consequences. It's become a religious belief in itself that that consequences are oppressive in some sense, um, or that the lowest rung or the oppressed class is a protected class. You know, people really want this idea of a protected class. You're protected from laws. You're protected from the judicial system. You're protected from feedback that would otherwise prevent you from doing a lot of these things, like stealing, like rape, um, like murder. Um, it's this breakdown of um, of legality in common law, where it's like, okay, who's to say what's right or wrong, and it's like they are the arbiters of what's right and wrong, and it's like whatever they say it is superordinate to the opinions of anything else. And I just want to try to paint a picture of this sort of narcissistic pride that I think is that I often refer back to, that is reoccurring to me, where um this character, this spirit of pride that that seems to that seems to possess people, and that people take possession of themselves. And there's common tropes around it. There's common characteristics. There's, I believe, just a way of understanding it. It's one of those things that is, to me, I think one of the most difficult things to understand. It's probably it's probably been one of the most difficult things for me to understand. Is like just trying to understand the nature of evil, or psychopathology. You're gonna have a really hard time wading through those waters, man, if you want to understand the mind of someone who's like a psychopath or something like that. You're probably gonna have some difficulty um learning about um it's like, okay, it's so Voldemort, you know. There's so many things that are Voldemort these days that it's like you can't even talk about them. And that's where society is at right now. It's like you can't really even talk about Voldemort. Um Obviously I say that name, but it's just a placeholder that I think is, I guess maybe a little more digestible for people. But um yeah, it's like Voldemort, man. Um so many things are Voldemort. Um so many things are, I would say intolerable, but it's not true, you know. Uh um Things treated as intolerable, things that are insisted upon as intolerable, um claim to be intolerable, you know. And so there's so much Voldemort these days. I think there's genuinely, I think the issue of past tyrannies were genuinely basically like, willful blindness, ignorance, pride, deviancy, lying. Lying is like the root of it, really. And you need an insane amount of pride in order to lie. I think, you know, it's like an insane narcissism to forestall lessons that to forestall understanding that that you're so much above or that whatever. Um, uh, and I think things like Charlie Kirk is like I think that it's driven primarily by ignorance or a desire for ignorance to a desire for blindness. Really, it's like stop talking. It's like this desire to silence. I know in my speech is there's things about it that uh I would really like to improve upon. I say a lot of the same words a lot. It becomes apparent to me when I watch my own stuff. Uh, it's not really a favorite thing that I like to do is to watch my own content, but uh, that's one thing I have learned is that some of the things that I say, I, well, it's just the language that I use. I say the word like a lot. I probably say a million times. So just trying to become self conscious of these things so I can avoid them or improve upon it. So, anyways, I don't know. I just think there's this crazy pride in the world today. And I don't mean like LGBT, even though they use that word. It's like I I I mean this this me against everything mentality that putting oneself above everything else, above all of the traditional structures, above all the everything that's been built before, just placing oneself above all of that, above all the uh, religious traditions, above above the teachings of the educational elite, I suppose, the 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 experts and there's I don't want to say that people should just swallow things and follow blindly um say like the experts within institutions, but at a certain point there's it's the whole thing of it all where there's like philosophers and things like that, Nietzsche, Carl Jung, Dostoevsky, all these great thinkers and people have undermined completely um just general education, general like the general hierarchical um way that things have been established. People have just completely undermined, I think, and have I think it's called a reverse hierarchy where people when they feel that they are at the bottom, they they sort of fabricate or create a new idea where they are the top of the top instead of trying to climb or whatever. They just say that they are at the top of the hierarchy and that's a fixed thing. And and that there's like no change in that and that the old hierarchies are obsolete. It's a really weird way of setting the bar, I think, where the bar that is set is the self. It seems like It's not the knowledge of other people. It's not the competent. It's not higher levels of competence of any given field. The bar is actually lower. So it's like setting the bar in a negative way for a lot of people. So it's not that you should be stronger and stronger. It's that you should be weaker and weaker. It's not that you should be smarter and smarter. You should be dumber and dumber. Uh, and the bar is set at a fixed level of the individual self who's imposing this new hierarchical uh, precedent where they are what's superordinate, what they believe is superordinate above all else. Uh, and so this has created, I think, a great sort of frustration in society because you're not supposed to listen to experts. You're not supposed to listen to these scholars who are who have been researching their whole lives about studying, mythology or different uh different fields of study. Even like mathematicians or historians, they're all corrupt. They're all racist. They're all math was created by a white man or something, so therefore it's oppressive. It's all this sort of stuff where it's like, okay, you're supposed to listen to someone who's indigenous, person of color. You're supposed to listen to someone who's dispossessed. You're supposed to you're supposed to change your focus, your orientation of what's paramount, listening to people who are considered educated. Uh, when they get pilloried, you're supposed to re-educate. You're supposed to re reorientate yourself to the critic. You're supposed to reorientate and reorientate yourself to um the marginal, to the most marginal thing that you can um find, I suppose, and try to uh give that all your future attention, I suppose. And man, it's it's so crazy to me that um that we're not supposed to look at towards people like David Goggins as like an example of like physical fitness and discipline and all those things that are considered virtuous. That we're not supposed to look at heroes as for ideals to have positive ideals and values. We're not supposed to look towards them. We should look away, and that we should look towards the most marginal, the oppressed, and and give them the podium, give them the the lead, give them control, give them total power. And it's 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 honestly, I think it is a form of narcissism. I would think um, that people want to reorientate attention this badly. That things that are considered beautiful. I mean, you look at Rate Your Music, where music is hierarchically rated, where there's the best albums of all time, the best rated albums of all time. And you're supposed to tell me that, well, any other work is just as good. Or rather, the worst possible piece of music is actually just as good as that. That's or better, actually. That it's superordinate. And it's I don't believe that, okay? I just don't. Okay. I don't spend my time listening to I will force myself, I will discipline myself to listen to music that's new to me. I will find good stuff. I like Merzbow, but it's this idea that um I guess the lowest of the lowest is somehow the most supreme, and that just sounds like a Luciferian. That sounds um it it sounds like pride to me, man. That's what I think pride is. That's a good way of actually defining pride, is that it's the lowest of the lowest that puts itself above all else. And it's just not what I believe, man. I believe in virtues. I believe um I like to believe uh in goodness. I want to be and become a good person. I think the notion of being a good person is a good thing. I think that people who want to improve themselves is a good thing. And I think improving yourself is a good thing. Um pretty much by definition. And it seems like improving yourself is actually a horribly uh people who want to improve themselves are seen as like oppressors, or they're seen as like um people who are transgressors. They're transgressing this law, I suppose, of that which is like lowest, I suppose. The law of that which is lowest, that trying to rise and be better and to strive higher and forward, and like heroism, and these things are, I don't know, it's like our society in large part has seems to have dismissed or discarded a lot of those values or principles that are really just caked into a lot of the art, a lot of the films, a lot, TV shows. Um, and it seems that it's very strange because we know that people who were in Nazi Germany, they felt like they were doing the right thing, or that they thought it was like a good cause. That's what they told themselves. And the thing was, is that there's a lot of lies, and a lot of the lies were disguised. A lot of the lies were with virtuous language, and I think that's exactly what's happening today. Is that so much of the virtuous language is just complete lies. I don't think people care about racial inequality. I don't think people care about um, injustice usually. I don't think people care about the poor people. I don't think people care about um, wealth inequality. I don't think people care about uh, universal health care, all these things. I think it's largely a thing where it's about, like I said much earlier in the video, it's like what is all this stuff appealing to? What is this sort of um what's in it for them, And I think that's really what is the appeal for a lot of this, is that, it's a this virtue gets you a position of power and authority, and with that you might get a partner, you might get some wealth, you might get a stable a home, and it's it's literally like the definition of selling out. Um, a lot of people selling out is just appealing to them. They want the fast cash, they want the money, they want the girls, they want um the power. They somehow all those things are like appealing to them. They want to be dominant. They want to cross that finish line. So, and they don't really care how they do it. They just it's it's a the trope of cheaters and how that plays out. Um, and it's like it's weird because it's like people want it. People want to like emulate a hero by being, the person who's in first place who wins. But they aren't willing to understand um all those things they could know if only they would. Uh, they aren't they aren't willing to really play by the rules, generally speaking. They don't want to take the hard way because I think a lot of times if you take the hard way, the hard but right way, you're there's a lot of humility in that when you start telling the truth. Sometimes telling the truth comes with um, some people have done a lot of really messed up stuff, and when you tell the truth about that, there there's likely consequences with that, and that um, it's like you don't want to reveal to people like crimes you've done because when you admit to crimes you've done, then there's um, the logical next thing, which is like, okay, you committed a crime, and then what should be done about that? And a lot of people don't want to um, um, undergo. They don't want to undergo that whole process. That would, in some ways, change their life. Um, I have done things in my life that were very difficult to admit to, um, and 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 I think it takes a lot of courage to admit to things that sometimes aren't always um, things that people um, I guess there's like a lot of unwanted feelings associated with that. It's not always the cleanest process. Um, it can be, and so, but it's like if you can't tell the truth, then man, you're gonna have a really hard time going through the world. And um, I think telling the truth, you build confidence with it. It might be very difficult at first to tell the truth because the world might be just totally living a lie. And when you tell the truth, a lot of times the truth isn't necessarily an affirmation for people. It's like people don't want to know when they're wrong. And the truth is like when people are wrong, they get an answer incorrect, and there's that whole process of honest feedback, like you're not doing this right or you're doing it right, and it's that feedback that um I think a lot of people punish. People actually don't want the feedback um because that's just so much to unpack right there. But people don't want to recognize that they've been off the path, or that for years or decades, and that to circle back, or to be off course, to have been off course for so long, and then to recognize it. It's like, oh, it's going to take so long to just get back to where I need to go. And a lot of people, they don't like to hear it, so a lot of people just don't tell them, and then they just keep going off into the distance, and People don't really, they punish those who try to correct them, so then they just wander off indefinitely because they never wanted that direction. They don't want guidance or the feedback from people. Um, so that's how it plays out. I think a lot of times, people punish those who give them feedback, so they stop giving them feedback, and so then they don't have anyone telling them that there's an iceberg, and so on. And I think that's the world we've gotten to right now, is that a lot of people, they've foregone accountability, and that um because of this, um I guess just there's a lot of blindness, I think, and ignorance because of these different Voldemort topics that people don't want um to confront or deal with, and would rather just pretend that they don't exist. And problem is that they do exist, and that they're probably going to grow if you don't deal with them. And I think accountability too is like a thing that I think people misuse the notion of accountability, or making people accountable, or trying to, yeah, trying to make someone accountable. It's like it goes back to that crusading against sin thing. It's like, I say it like a lot. Um, it goes back to the crusading against sin. If I just punish you as much as possible, it's gonna make it, people somehow believe that's gonna make someone accountable, and that there's gonna be no consequences with punishing someone too. On top of that, it's kind of, I could say whatever, but so yeah, I just think the truth is really important. I think it can keep us on track a lot of times. That if you just tell the truth, that um things will work out in a way that's more proper. I think a lot of times people lie and manipulate and give a false image of themselves to a heightened image of themselves, and to appeal to other people. Uh, you think of sort of uh, false sort forms of false forms of maybe flattery, or hospitality, like fake forms of hospitality and authentic forms of hospitality. People who are personable, but it's just a total lie, and they're just have a total mask on. I don't know. I think when people are honest with each other and they give each other proper feedback, it just helps things make so much more sense. People navigate so much more better. Um, you tell people what you want. You tell people what you don't want. And like, say if you're trying to find a partner, and you tell someone like what you want or what you don't want, and and I just think it helps a lot with avoiding unnecessary situations. A lot of people, like with hookup culture, and all these flings, and uh, chronic monogamy, people, I think there's this very casual. I think people are casually fake for a lot of that stuff, and so they might say that, oh, it's like they don't want anything more, they don't want, or whatever, they don't want anything, nothing serious.
Um, but I see, a lot of people their conscience gets to them. You know, um they might think that, oh, it's just casual, um but their conscience will just tear them apart or just really get to them. And some people they'll listen to their conscience, some people they won't. And um and I think part of the honesty is like including that conscience to things. It's like, um what are your goals? What are your goals really? Like, do you want to be on the straight and narrow? Do you what kind of relationship do you actually want? Do you want something that's serious, or do you not? And or do you not know? And I think a lot of people they're not really honest, and so they get into these scenarios, these relationships, and these situations where they go into it fake. So then they keep up this fake um sort of persona, and it's like an act. And and I think acting can be kind of like that. Sort of acting can actually be sort of taxing and effortful. And I think eventually people don't really like to put on an act like that. People want to just be authentic with each other. They want to be genuine. And I think honesty and being genuine is essentially like being truthful. Like, what do you actually think? What do you actually believe? Um, what do you think is right? And I think a lot of times people don't, um, I guess, admit or account for those things, and kind of go forward regardless, and don't really listen to their conscience. And so, and even with some problems, it's like you can, I think honesty is a really great way to solve problems too, because um, admitting to a problem is huge a lot of times. Um, if you tell people you struggle with addiction, and that you don't want to do drugs, but you maybe you somehow end up doing them anyways, but you feel like it's really destructive. You tell people all this honest stuff, and I think it's gonna make people not want to give you drugs or enable you as much if you're trying to tell people that you want to be on track, and that maybe it's affecting your health. And it's I think the truth is just a great way to better navigate yourself. And um and that inauthenticity, putting on a front, it can be very damaging, when you don't tell people how you really feel. um because then it's like everything's okay then, and um but that can really, I don't know, I think it just leads to a place where things just get worse. And the acting, it's like all you do is act at a certain point, and you don't want to get to a place like that. Because I think when you get so deep into a lie that to tell the truth would be like, I shouldn't even be here right now. Like, I should be somewhere just totally else. I should be Maybe I should be studying. Maybe I should be at home. Maybe I shouldn't be doing these drugs. Maybe I shouldn't be with this person. Maybe I should stop doing this. And it's like you're you find yourself in point A, but really you should be in point B. And in order to get to point B, you might have to give up that point A and many of those things associated with it. A lot of the friends, a lot of the stuff, and I think that's a very difficult thing for people to give up or to change. A lot of times that maybe it's like a job, a friend group, uh, a, I don't know. It could probably be anything like a partner, money, and and you think of Nazi Germany, and there's a book called Ordinary Men, like how blue collar workers ended up committing the worst crimes. Uh, and and I think that was largely because people were living a lie and wouldn't tell the truth. It's because um, they shouldn't be doing these executions. They should be uh uh not doing them, you know. And that might cost them their job. That might cost them their family. That might cost um a lot of things that might cost. And a lot of people aren't willing to pay those prices. And it's kind of no wonder because um to really disobey in Nazi Germany came with very real consequences. People, their families were threatened, or even worse, they were actually, killed or punished, tortured, etc. And to go against the grain in that society, it would likely be very ostracizing in a way. I think a lot of people who were police in Nazi Germany or were in the military who disobeyed commands and stuff like that. A lot of people were killed. A lot of people were sent to jail or prison, I believe, or sent to maybe even to the concentration camps. And you can imagine, like, so many people want to claim virtue these days about hating Nazis, but it's like, would you have been that person who's stopped executing people, even though like it's sort of like a trolley problem. Like either you continue forward with executions or they're gonna kill your whole family. And unfortunately I think most people would go forward with that, with doing executions and keep their job. A lot of people, they can't even imagine giving up their jobs because there's so much security associated with that, their housing and all this stuff, healthcare, all this stuff. But it's like to really try to live truthfully, um all that stuff is like um I don't know. I think it was people living a lie that created Nazi Germany to begin with. So it's I think the only way out of it is to really tell the truth. um I don't know. I If you want to cure that problem, you have to tell the truth. And then there's people will bring up examples like, okay, what about Anne Frank being in the closet or whatever? What about her? Would you tell her? Would you tell them? Would you tell the Nazis? And that is admittedly a problem that I don't completely have an answer like I don't feel like I immediately have an answer ready for that, but like in part I think I would still just try to stick with the truth. Um I would say, you could just tell them that you disagree with the government and their treatment towards Jews. And I don't know, man. That's there's things I think people can say, albeit not without I don't know, consequence, I guess, but it's that's the truth of the situation. And um I don't know. I think we have to get to a point where we can discuss things like this and open ourselves up to change. Um because I think, if you really did believe in doing what's right, you could say that. Um but I think I'll leave it with here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, everybody.